Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to the Accursed. And once again, we return to the Primal. It wasn't so long ago we were talking about the Primal in a character creation video where we created a Raptor Survivalist. And there we went into some of the rules surrounding the Primal. Here we're going to go into them a little deeper. And before we get into it in full detail, speaking of character creation, next Monday we will be doing another live character creation stream at around 4 p.m. BST on this channel. So do tune in. Do tune in and let us know live what kind of character you want to see. Help us tailor the character we're creating. And if you don't think you're going to be able to tune in live, that's absolutely fine. Leave in the comments below the kind of character you want to see, because I will be reviewing these comments and incorporating them into the character we make. Now, don't just say, I want to see an unburdened sorcerer. Don't just say, I want to see a battleground angel outcast. Say the kind of character you want to see. I want to see character concepts. I want to see some sentences surrounding the kind of character you want. Let's not make another primal, because we've already done a primal in character creation. Let's go for one of the other 4 lineages, and we have a huge number of families that you can choose from. But come up with a character concept, and I will undoubtedly use some of the ideas that are suggested, just as I did last time. So, the Primal. I don't think there's any way of my lying to say anything but the Primal are probably tied first place for my favourite lineage in Curseborne. I know it's inappropriate for me to have a favourite, but I do. And Primal and one other that I won't name are my top 2 for coming up with character concepts, tying plots around, really playing up their strengths and weaknesses. And one of the reasons for that is because of how much time I spent working on the Primal for Curseborne, and how happy I feel about the revisions we made to the Primal from the Kickstarter manuscript to the way the manuscript looks today. We received a lot of feedback, and a lot of it was really constructive and very, very helpful, and it helped inspire some of the ideas that you will hear about in this video with any luck. So, what are the Primal, first of all? If you've missed out on all of my discussion of the Primal previously, you will know, or you won't know, that the Primal are more than just beast folk. They are not just animalistic shapeshifters, though that is certainly a part. They are also elementals. This was integral to me. When I was writing Primal material, I wanted the elemental side pushed forward, because they are primeval as well as animalistic. They are ancient. They have something about them that is, I guess you could say, earthy, but at the same time cosmic. There is something otherworldly about them too. And therefore, it was really important to me that when a primal takes their wild form, which we'll get into in a moment, they're not just turning into a sleek animal. They're not just turning into a, I guess, optimal version of a cat or a spider. They are turning into a monstrous, hulking, seething hybrid of human, beast, monster, and element. So you might have your lichen with its bones extending, skin splitting, muscles throbbing, that as it prowls towards you, it is showering sparks onto the floor. Its eyes are crackling with electricity, and when it roars or shouts, thunder rolls forth. I love the idea that Primal are more than just animal shapeshifters. They are also elemental with it. And it's something that we have really tied into the abilities they have access to, while not necessarily codifying that every family is in a grid of, this is the earth family, this is the fire family, this is the water family. I don't want it to be that strict, and I strongly encourage you, the players, that when you play Curseborne, if you want your lichen to be associated with fire or ice or whatever, do it. Just change up some of the options. Speak to your story guide. It hurts nothing to do that. I don't want people to feel like their Primal has to be locked to a specific appearance, a specific power set, or anything like that. What we provide is guidelines. I want you to tailor your characters as you see fit. So, let's start with wild form. It is probably the key to playing a Primal, that you have access to a wild form, the ability to change shape, to transform, and mechanically the way you do so is you just bleed 1 curse die. As long as you've got some curse dice, you bleed 1 and you transform. This is a willing transformation, but it is still painful, it's still loud. You are indeed experiencing the stretching of your bones, the splitting of your skin, the bulging and multiplication potentially of your muscles, teeth falling loose or growing, nails cutting through you. It's agony, and this is not something you do with subtlety unless you can succeed at a stamina or resolve action while you are transforming. That's your choice whether you want to do it discreetly or not. Of course, if you roll, there is always the possibility of a cruel failure, which probably wouldn't be ideal at this time. Now, as I mentioned, the wild form is not a sleek wolf or elegant cat. This is something hybridized. This is William Birkin in Resident Evil 2. This is the Incredible Hulk. This is the leader. This is your hulking, seething werewolf. This is not a simple creature that you can hold in the palm of your hand. It is something terrifying, monstrous, and destructive. And keep that in mind because it ties into their abilities. Now, when you transform, you gain a set of abilities, what are called shifts. Now, these are not prescribed. What does that mean? Well, when you create a character in Curseborne, you choose your lineage, you choose your family, and you also choose a role. The role is not important right now. So what we're looking at is lineage and family. Lineage comes with 6 possible shifts. Family comes with 6 possible shifts. When you transform, using your wild form ability, bleeding that 1 curse die, you choose 2 shifts from your lineage selection, 2 from your family selection. And if you don't like them, or if you find one of those shifts is not useful in this scene anymore, you can reflexively, so this is an action that you can do like that, bleed a curse die and change abilities for other abilities. It is as simple as that. And you might think, well, how am I supposed to choose on the fly? Well, typically you're going to choose to transform at a point that is optimal for you. I recommend having only your character's lists in front of you, so a list of lineage, a list of family, and having abilities in mind that you want to go with, and just go tick, 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 tick. Those are the abilities you're choosing, the shifts you are going for. And add your favourite ones to your character sheet so you can automatically defer to them. I've now played with players, I've ran a lot of Curseborne, as you can imagine, and I've played with some players who always go for the same shifts every single time. And this is a really interesting idea, that some Primal are going to have their default mode. This is the kind of shapeshifter I am. And others who always change the shifts they go for. They are very situational, and even in the midst of combat, they are bleeding curse dice to change the abilities they've got access to. So you choose 2 from lineage, 2 from family. What shifts are available? Well, for example, the Primal Lineage. Everyone has access to these 6. +1 enhancement that stacks on all physical actions. What is that? Well, an enhancement is an automatic hit that applies after you have rolled a hit. You need to roll at least 1 hit, then you can start applying enhancement. Now, some of you will be aware that this was already in the manuscript as of the time of the Kickstarter as a default shift option. But what you may have missed is the weight of a stackable enhancement. There aren't many abilities in Curseborne that provide stackable enhancement. The difference between enhancement and stackable enhancement is if you have an enhancement from a weapon, you have an enhancement from charging, you have an enhancement from just being ultra muscular and roided up, those will typically cancel each other out when it comes to the roll. You do not stack them on top of each other. But if you have stackable enhancement, you could be holding your blazing great sword for an enhancement there, and add your physical enhancement from this shift on top of it, which means you can start really racking up enhancements. So that's one option. There is also the shift option of +1 enhancement that stacks on all influence actions relating to intimidation. Again, this can be major. That sounds significantly more subtle than just applying to all physical actions, but if you're going around not only with blackmail information, let's say. So this is going to give you an enhancement on intimidation. But now you've got +1 stackable enhancement on your all intimidation actions. That is going to start adding up. Shift option 3, +1 enhancement that stacks to defensive actions. You can basically become a wall, a boulder. You can defend your compatriots, you can defend yourself, you can become unassailable, and you'd be amazed how this paired with the intimidate stacking, this is what I've seen one player do a lot. Basically stand there, let the enemy wail on you, act as if it's nothing, and then use your stackable on intimidation actions as well, and at that point, it's time to talk. I love it when combat ends not with death, but with someone backing down and surrendering because they realise they can't do a damn thing to you. Shift 4, regenerate 1 injury at the end of the round, unless it came from an attack with a magical tag or a spell. This is a nice archetypal shapeshifter ability. Everyone, based on various games, expects shapeshifters to be able to regenerate their health, unless it comes from certain sources, silver, for example, in this case, the magical tag. And this is something that I think if we didn't include it, people would say, well, why can't my shapeshifters recover their injuries? Well, they can. Now, shift number 5 is an interesting one. It doesn't sound flowery, extravagant, but it is. Any of the 4 previous shifts applied a second time. Now, why is this good? Because if you want to charge into combat like a spined cannonball and rip people apart, you now have +2 enhancement that stacks on all physical abilities, or +2 enhancement on intimidation, or regenerate 2 injuries at the end of each round. This is a very significant one because it is almost like a stack upon a stack. So if you really want to hyper-focus the kind of primal you're playing, that is a really good shift to take. And finally, the 6th one, which is my favourite one, and probably goes unnoticed, is distraction, which is a combat trick, is also an influence trick. So distraction is a combat trick that basically means that you can target an enemy, that if you buy this trick, they will target you in favor of anyone else. They will not attack the rest of your party. They will not attack any hostages or NPCs, let's say, SGCs that you're trying to defend, that they will focus everything on you. That's what it usually is. Now, it's also an influence trick, which means if you're playing a kind of social animal, you can get all eyes on you, all attention on you, with a social role instead of just having to hit someone to do it. And that means your comrades can escape, they can attack that person from behind. It is a really good trick to expand into the influence realm. So those are your 6 options. You choose 2 of them when you take your wild form. There you go. That is it. But that isn't all, because you also take 2 shifts from your family. I mentioned you're going to probably want to have your 6 available primal shifts on one sheet in front of you, and probably just underneath them your 6 available family shifts, and you will very quickly grow acquainted with what they are, so you can easily choose the ones you want. Let's look at the 8 hands, the spider shifters at this point, because we haven't spoken about them a great deal, and they are one of my favourites. So the 8 hands, the Ocho, their wild form shift selection includes Established Grapple is also a ranged combat trick. So Established Grapple is a combat trick that typically you can only apply in close combat, as you'd imagine. You can now use it at range. This is really interesting. It's obviously flavorful for the spiders to be able to snare people from afar. Essentially, you shoot someone and now they are paralyzed, more or less. That's a lot of fun. Shift 2, you can apply 1 natural armor to yourself. It is padded, so you gain extra injury, and it is spiked. Therefore, anyone who's attacking you is likely to come off worse. Shift 3, unarmed attacks have the elemental attunement Darkness, so you might blind someone. You can choose to blind someone when you're hitting them. And poisoned tags, so you can poison people just by punching them, biting them, kicking them, scratching them. Shift 4, your vision is unimpeded in the darkness area effect, so whether that's natural or unnatural darkness, you can see or sense perfectly well within it. Shift 5, You can buy the combat trick, and this is unique to the 8 hands, Impose Darkness. It costs you 2 hits, so let's combo up. Let's say that you decided you're going to you're going to really stack up +2 enhancement on all physical actions. You take your action. Let's say you get 1 hit. You roll 1 hit to hit. You add your +2 enhancement. You now have 3 hits. It costs you 2 of them to impose darkness. After dealing 1 injury to the opponent, you use those other 2 hits to impose darkness on an area effect starting on your target. You plunge them into night unnaturally. And the last shift, climb sheer surfaces at normal movement speed. So if I was to take a really grisly, unpleasant 8 hands character, I would probably be going for, let's say, the shifts of the +1 physical. I would probably take the, let's think, I'd take the +1 enhancement on all influence actions relating to intimidation. I would probably take the established grapple is a ranged combat trick. And I think I would then take the climb sheer surfaces because it is just a bizarre and intimidating thing to do. Anyway, all of the families have options like this. And as a player, you don't need to memorize every single one of them because you're only going to be playing one character at a time, typically. But just have them noted down in front of you, the ones that apply to you, and note down your favorite ones so you can defer to them, and it is as simple as that. When you take your wild form, you take 2 from one table, 2 from the other, and those are your options. You are not prescribed a strict set of abilities. You get to tailor your shift, which means each time you shapeshift, that may even affect your character's appearance. How they are intimidating is a part of this. Now, there are also protean challenges, the kinds of things that a primal is going to have to deal with being a primal. Namely, when you're in your wild form, you'll gain +1 difficulty to any kind of influence actions that are not intimidate based. You cannot buy the pull your punch combat trick. Basically, any attack you make has got to be maximum force. You also suffer some complications. You take a minor complication whenever you are challenged. So if you don't buy it off, you can't leave your wild form until you suffer at least 1 injury. And your creature, that primal essence within you, is going to dictate your next action. Tied typically to your family's impulse, which we'll get onto. You also have a moderate complication. That is bought off for 2 hits. Any non-attack actions when a bond mate has been hurt or humiliated basically prevent you from leaving your wild form until you avenge them in your next action. So the primal are very much a center pillar of an accursed crew. They want to defend their compatriots. They want to avenge them. They will not allow a slight to go unanswered. It's a dangerous way to play, but it's a lot of fun. So then, going back to benefits, you have primal senses. You can choose to bleed 1 curse die in any scene and ask the story guide Ace a question that your senses may be able to pick up. What is the most dangerous thing here? What is the weakest thing here? Who here is scared? You bleed that curse die, the story guide gives you the answer. Simple as that. That's it. That's it for the abilities. So let's start looking at inheritances. So inheritance, you gain an inheritance based on what your major path is. So if you choose Primal as your major path inheritance is going to be a bonus to tracking and hunting equal to your character's entanglement, which is your tier of power. Most characters start at entanglement 1, but this is a very significant bonus because it applies a hit before dice are rolled. So if your character is a hunter tracker, and you are trying to hunt something down, there are so few abilities in Curseborne that apply hits before the roll of the dice. Most of the time it is an enhancement that only applies if you roll 1 hit. If you don't roll any hits, those enhancements don't apply either. In this case, you will gain a hit before dice are rolled at all hunting and tracking. Plus, when you gain a piece of evidence as a primal with this major path, you may gain a second piece of evidence without spending anything, because you can figure these things out. It is your primal sense. Now let's look at the 8 hands option, because we've already been discussing the 8 hands. They get the option of an inheritance instead if you decide you're going to take 8 hands as your major path instead of the Primal Lineage. The web you weave extends to other people's contacts. Once per session, you can use any contact belonging to any other character as if they were your own, because you have a web, a network of information. You ignore any complication that comes from tapping this contact more than once in a scene, and you gain +1 enhancement in close combat within the darkness area effect. You are a creature of darkness. The night is your ally. So there's a lot of fun to be had there, and you can choose which of these inheritances you want based on what your major path is. So let's talk about Damnation. It is, after all, in the title of the video. Every accursed has a damnation. You are, after all, cursed. And in terms of the primal, it is a primal impulse. The impulse to do something, typically something harmful. After all, you are a beast and elemental in human form. Whenever your curse dice pool reaches 0, that is always the key for any accursed. When the curse dice pool reaches 0, you are going to suffer the effects of your damnation, which for the primal is an automatic shift into your wild form and the compulsion to carry out your family impulse. You basically suffer a major complication on your next action, which, if not bought off, the creature, the story guide, dictates the kind of aggressive impulse you must take, and you cannot regain any curse dice until you resolve this damnation, which is basically satisfy the creature's impulse. And that impulse will be that you must impose at least 1 injury on someone and a status effect that depends on their major path. So doing so will allow you to revert to your human form. You will recover 1 curse die, and if you inconvenience the rest of the crew, they will gain a momentum for it. Major path impulses. So there are impulses that are dependent on what your major path is. Let's look again at the options we're talking about for this character. If you chose Primal Lineage as your major path, your impulse is you shift into a protean creature rapidly changing size, form, elements, claws, and teeth with an impulse for destruction. Act to impose the mortally wounded status effect or reduce their injuries to 0 on a victim to fight back. So, able to fight back, I should say. So, basically, you have to pick on someone who can fight against you and reduce them to 0 injuries or mortally wound them. This is a big deal. If you went for 8 hands, you shift into a bristling 100-limbed arachnid with grinding mandibles, which drips smaller spiders and leaks darkness with an impulse for secrets. You have to act to impose at least 1 injury, as before, and you need to immobilize someone who is able to fight back. So, paralyze them, restrain them. It's not quite as harsh, let's say, but what you're trying to do is ensnare them so that you can extract secrets from them. Once you are able to do this, you can turn back. Your damnation is over. Now, despite the fact we have these mechanical aspects to resolving a damnation, every single one of them is resolvable narratively. You do not need to resolve them with dice rolls. You do not need to physically impose or mechanically impose the status effect. Those are guidelines. They're instructions that you can follow. Basically, if you're not using an ability that imposes the immobilized status effect, you can, let's say, I hack at the hamstrings or the Achilles tendons of my enemy. If you succeed, congratulations, that person's immobilized, whether they've got a status effect or not. So that's one way of doing it. Or you just discuss with your story guide and say, I'd like to do this, and as long as it's interesting and furthers the story, they're probably going to say yes. In every single lineage chapter we have in Curseborne, we provide options for resolving these mechanically and narratively. Because one of the main pieces of feedback we received from the Curseborne manuscript when we did the Kickstarter was a lot of people wanted narrative, a lot of people wanted mechanical, and the game was leaning heavily narrative. Now we have both. So you can use either, but don't feel compelled to use both at all times. The whole point is we want to provide you with options without bogging you down. Final thing I guess we should talk about then is your Primal Torment. Every single lineage of Curseborne comes with certain torments. You choose one torment because when you enact your torment, you can gain a curse die or momentum. Torments are ways of essentially tormenting your character for being accursed. And the options that are presented in the Primal chapter are Elemental Fury. I'll read from this. Primal are thunder, earthquakes, and hurricanes given form. They are rage at an elemental level. Nature does not respect self-control and human codes of loyalty. It destroys. When the character is in combat, they can trigger this torment. The Primal hyper-focuses on the biggest, most deadly target in the area, preventing her from assisting or interacting with allies unless they're in the way, in which case, away with you, they say. Basically, you will always go for the biggest, baddest opponent if you take Elemental Fury and decide to trigger it. You can take Predator's colours. Primal struggle to conceal their bestial natures at the best of times. Losing, making an error, or being mocked or made to look a fool forces a Primal to revert to their Predator's colours. When the character appears weak, they can trigger this torment. The Primal immediately lashes out wildly, verbally or physically, when you use this torment. Final option, Proteus abides. The wild form of this Primal is truly a thing of elemental chaos. If the character has this torment, they can choose for the story guide to nominate the 2 shifts from their lineage selection and the 2 shifts from the family selection. The player can alter the choice by bleeding 1 curse die and taking a reflexive action as normal. This is a real wild card action. It's actually my favourite one. We added it after the manuscript revisions. I just came up with it. I thought, there's going to be some players who don't want to have to choose their shifts every single time, but it's also narratively a really interesting way of having no control over your body. You are an uncontrollable shapeshifter, and therefore if you give that power to the story guide, now you've basically got to roll with those punches. So I really like Proteus Abides. I think some of you do too, because in our Primal character creation video a few weeks ago, that was the torment we went for our Raptor Survivalist. So anyway, our character will of course gain access to certain motifs that will allow certain spells to be cheaper. Our character will also have access to the whole range of Maelstrom practices, the various spells under the Mutable Form, Depthless Fury, and the Stranger spell groups. But we don't need to go into magic right now. We've now covered what the Damnation is and what a Primal's innate abilities are. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, am really fond of the Primal. I think they have turned out fantastically, and what's more, they have turned out completely distinct from shapeshifters in other role-playing games. I think there's a lot to sell these Primal, and I hope you enjoy them. I hope you enjoy playing them as much as I enjoyed writing all of this, and I love telling people about this stuff. So let us know in the video description below what you want to see next. We've got a character creation video coming up next week. We'll probably do another guide to the families the week after. We've only got 3 families left, so if we start plunging into another Damnation video soon, I want to know which lineage you want us to cover. So get in touch, post below, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you very much for watching.